Hey guys, what's up? All right. It's Double Deuce back. I promised you guys a video on the Tamiya Bruiser and the Mountaineer or Mountain Rider or whatever it was they had back in the day on the transmission and the whatnots and the workings of it. So I ripped this one apart today to kind of go over um, the problems they had and some of the stuff that's happened through the years that I was kind of surprised to see. That I figured I'd bring it up because it was, I was kind of bewildered when I seen it. But so anyway, this is your original. I got my little pointer here. 58048 Bruiser motor and your 3-speed transmission. And the reason I wanted to do the video is because there's a lot of these on eBay, and I mentioned in my last video that they're wore out, and people are getting them, and the slipper clutches are gone in them, and so the slipper clutch is a very easy repair. There's actually 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 ways to go about it. The simplest way is what I'm going to get to in a second. And it's easy to take it apart. You just take the front cover off here, the front housing. Take your 2 bolts out on the motor, the front housing off, and your spur gear is right here. Your front, it's plastic. All the rest of them are brass, and they have 2 pot metal gears in here. And you can see this one right here, that's pot metal. And why they did that, I have no clue. If they were gonna, it's just the weakest link in the tranny. I've flattened these out in 2 of my other transmissions. You can't overpower the things, I'll put it that way. That's why they got the slipper clutch. When I converted mine to nitro, and so I had a 25 Super Tiger on there, and it was back then it was a high performance motor. And so the first problem I had was a slipper clutch. So I took the slipper clutch and I had actually stripped out this part here in the center where it locks in. And I'll get to that right now to show you. This is actually a transmission I had got with a kit that I had bought, and it was on eBay. I bought the whole rolling frame and everything for a couple $100 a long time ago. Okay, here's your spur gear in the front. Okay, now your pinion goes on here, and your gear here actually goes inside to this front shaft over here. Now here's the problem that we're getting. You can hear it here. I'll try to get it up here. And that's just with me. I've got it apart, but that's what it was doing. So you go online and you're going to restore a Bruiser, or you want a transmission from a Bruiser for your current project or retrofit or whatever, and you pay a lot of money for them because they're worth a lot of money now. And this is what you get. When they say, oh yeah, it spins freely and all that stuff, yeah, it will when there's no load on it. You put a load on the thing, and as soon as you get it installed in your truck, which, if you retrofit it, it's a lot of work to find out that it does this. And it, just sits there and makes all kinds of racket, don't do nothing. All right, so we're going to remedy that right now. This E-clip right here, C-clip, or whatever you want to call it, is you need a pair of snap ring pliers to take it off, or you can fumble with it with a screwdriver. It actually goes on the front side here. There's a stainless washer on here, and then there's an internal gear in there. And I'll take them apart right now. Get my Mahasa fingers out of the way. Okay, and this is part of your slipper clutch. All right. Now see that little hex in there? Well, what happened to me on mine, I stripped it out here. So I had to put some really 2mm screws in the thing to screw it together. But if your clutch is slipping, okay, on the back side of this, you'll see there's little bumps on there and these little recesses set in there and lets it over top of it. Now, what you can do for a quick fix, remove this, turn it around. That way the bumps are facing the outside on your back of your gear here. Put it back in, and now when you go to turn it now, you really got to twist it hard. Install your washer and your snap ring clip back on there, and you're good to go, and it'll actually be a little stronger before it slips again. And which in my case it was too strong because I had overpowered the whole truck itself, and that's when I stripped out the pot metal gears here. So that's a little lesson for you guys if you have a problem. I know one of my followers there, he had bought a project truck and he had the same problem, so I advised him to do that, and you know, I guess it worked out fine for him. So he was all tickled. Now he's got 2 really cool Bruisers, and he's up and running both of them now. Now there was I want to go over the motor with you. Okay, this is actually a 750 RS 750 motor, and it's massive. It is huge. Okay, and it's got 4mm bolts in here, and it has a fixed pinion. It's pressed on, so you can't change the pinion on the thing. And even if you can change, if you wanted to change the pinion, it's not going to fit back in the housing. So these trucks are very limited, you know, when they, you know, between the wheel hubs and not being able to change the wheels to, you know, no motor choices in the thing. Basically, don't get me wrong, it was a really good motor. It took just a lot of juice to run the thing. I actually had mine wired up to 14.2 volts because I had 14.4, excuse me. I had 2 7.2 stick batteries, and I wired them in series, and it kind of cooked the speed control after a while, but it was fun. It had a lot of power, and you know, it was pretty cool. But there was a lot of wear on the drivetrain for that simple fact, and I didn't have any transmission problems, but I had a lot of drive shaft problems because the propeller shafts on these were made out of brass, and brass is really a soft metal and it wears pretty quickly. So, but I did retrofit a 540 on my first release one there, my old school Bruiser, and to do that you have to figure out, you got to kind of like slot these holes in here for these to fit. Now you don't have a lot of room to turn the motor up or down for a smaller pinion or a larger pinion if you put a 540 can motor on it. And I think a lot of this stuff here was probably why Tamiya went with the style transmission in the re-released 2012 version, and the high lift series of the Hilux and F-150. But you can do it, you just run a bigger pinion. Yeah, it puts a little more strain on the motor, but you know, there's always some kind of a sacrifice to make. Another thing I wanted to get to while I was here, while I got it apart, try to explain this whole thing. There's the front cover. It mates to this cover here. Okay, this is the front half of your transmission housing that goes in like this. This is your front cover. It goes in like that with your motor. And this is basically your main body here and here. Okay, now this here has your exit shaft down here for your front drive shaft for your full drive out of your transfer case. And so everything kind of goes together. This slides in that way. One of the cool things about these transmissions were you can make it full-time four-wheel drive just by relocating a spring, and it was a really crafty idea. You can't do it on the HGP 407. You can't do it. They've eliminated that. They've simplified the transmission a little bit. Instead of having this gigantic gear coming into all these other gears up front in here, this is actually your third gear collar that slides, and your second gear collar in here, and your first gear here. The HCP 407 basically eliminated, I guess, one of these collars, because this actually goes through the housing here, like so, up in here, and when this pushes forward for your third gear, it pushes the collar forward onto this shaft here and that shaft there. It connects those two together for your third gear. And your second gear is this shaft here and the shaft that this is on currently. Now first gear is right there. So the way it worked was this long spring that's on this one here, because this one's already been converted, and then there's a little short spring in here. You can see it's kind of on top of that one. I think what they did was they just put it on there for so they really wouldn't lose it or something. But when these are together, like squeezed together like they should be, this little short spring is what moves the thing from first to second to third, and then this spring will bounce it back. It's really important that these springs are here. But this long spring was actually on the back side of the shaft over here. Now you see what happened? I just pulled it out of four-wheel drive. See, when you pull it back to go into 4 low in first gear, okay, it goes in first gear there, but then it locks it in here like that. Okay, when it locks it, it engages your front rotating assembly for your front drive shaft. And then when you unlock it, it'll actually just be two-wheel drive. So if you take this long spring that's back here, and there's a collar on here, pull it out. This transmission is really gridded up, and I'll get to that in a second. Okay, you see this collar hangs here. Well, this really long spring here, because these slide off. They don't slide out the front because it's fixed over here with a brass ferrule on there. But if you pull that off, there's your shift fork, and there's your springs. Got to keep it in focus of the camera. Okay, that's the way it is factory setup. All right, I'll put this back on here like so. That's how the factory setup works. So when you push this rod forward, this spring, the long spring down here, pushes it out of four-wheel drive and first gear and lets us free up in it. It pushes it into second. This will go into second. So anyway, long story short, take this spring from the back, put it in between these two, and you can leave that little one in there if you want. Put your collar back on, put your forks back on your couplers, and throw it all back together again. And so it's just really, you have to really concentrate and you tear this thing apart. I suggest putting stuff on like some napkins or paper towels or something, or even a soft bath towel or something. You use your shirt, it doesn't matter, because it keeps stuff from rolling away and bouncing away. Over here it's gone, it's like over here, see ya, it'll bounce off a hard surface, and then you're looking for it on the floor for 2 hours. But like I say, the reason I tore this tranny down was, one, to do the slipper clutch, do the video for you guys, and the other thing I noticed too, sometimes there's such thing called too much. It's not a good thing. This transmission was completely packed. I mean, completely packed with white grease. Now, a little lesson, okay, because I had tried to soak some of this out, all right. This white grease, some of it's still a little pliable, but if you see, it's got a wax consistency. It looked like inside this looked like a bee's nest in here. With just that white grease had dried up and turned to wax. So it was just all gritted up and everything. And then, to add insult to injury, these things come with these little rubber plugs on from the factory, and you know, they're basically to, I guess, so you can grease the transmission or whatever. Over time, whatever's in the white grease turns these little things into like that. It's hard rubber, like, and it this stuff here is all embedded in every one of these teeth and everything. So it's like a mess, and it's all gritty. So this would not shift into third gear, and it was driving me nuts because everything seemed like it was operating properly. I could do it by hand, but it just wouldn't go in. And the problem was, this front collar over here was just packed with this little black rubber stuff from one of the plugs that had gotten hard over time, and you know, it just locked it right up tight. It's like sand being in there, basically, is what it feels like. So I'm going to take this and give it a good soaking. And what I used to use, to be honest with you, is I would just get some regular car oil, motor oil, and you don't need a lot. And I would just put a little bit in like the top of a aerosol can lid or something, and I would just dip the pieces in there. I used to use basically like you know, 1040 or 2050, and I would dip the stuff in there and just let it set a little while, come out, and just assemble it, and everything shifts like butter after that. And the white grease, the only problem is you just want to coat the gears lightly. You don't want to overload them, because the way these housings are made here, they leak. There's no gaskets in these things, where the newer ones have gaskets in them. And I don't believe the HDP 407 has gaskets, but I know the re-release has gaskets in it. And another trick I used to be able to do is, if you look inside this, in here, gotta get a little sideways, there is actually, where this front shaft comes out, there's a little recess in there. And what I used to do with mine is I would put a light silicone sealer around here. I would make the things up, and when I was assembling my gears, I used to take one of the little rubber O-rings that they had for the shocks, to rebuild the shocks, and I would slide that right over the shaft on the front, on the bottom, and between the silicone seal, between all the housings, and that little rubber O-ring on there, you didn't have any oil dripping, you know, on your nightstand or your kitchen table or wherever else you wanted to put it. And so it kept things kind of clean. So anyway, I'm going to soak this here. I got some goodies in the mail today. I want to go over my next video with you guys. For you true scale guys, I got kind of a surprise. I was kind of surprised to see it myself, but I did a lot of researching on the internet, and you know, the hobby is just blowing up like crazy. It is like, I mean, this is probably one of the greatest times ever to be in an RC car, plane, boat, you know, tank, whatever. You know, the hobby. It's just amazing, the stuff that they are now manufacturing. And so I got some, they're called gimmick wipers, and I'm going to take that, and I found some true scale wipers online that are actual, they look just like true scale windshield wipers, and I'm going to try to combine the gimmick wiper motor set with the true scale wipers and see if we can get them working. And I got some scale hardware I'm going to show you next too on my next video. So anyways, this is Denny. I'm going to roll now and kind of clean up my mess and get my fingers washed up here and get this thing soaking and get it back together. And it's going to be for my next new project. I think I'm going to run this. I was going to get a extra speed 2-speed tranny and transfer case, but I'm building a Bruiser, I'm going to see if I can keep it keep the tranny original anyway, but that could change. But anyway, like, share, subscribe if you want. Any questions, comments, don't be afraid to hit me up. I try to get back as soon as I can. And that's about it. Have a good one, guys. Adios.